For those of you who don't know the story, so you have a Socrates, that's the king moth. And Socrates has been flying towards the fire. He gets consumed by the fire and somehow survives and comes out. But he comes out not as a man, he comes out as fire. To the point that when someone says, either give us this or we'll take your life, he says, take my life. And when someone says to him, once you die, where should we bury you? He says, if you can find Socrates, you can bury him wherever. That Socrates is fire. He's a spirit, and you can't contain spirits. They need no coffins. You can't house them in ground. So what you have is Socrates, and he goes out there and he says, I am the fire, I am the flame. Who wants to come and get to know me? Now, out there in the universe, there are 4 different kinds of people, or 4 different kinds of students. They're all good. They're all good because that's their capacity. They can't go any further. That's not the way they're made. Maybe they have too many responsibilities or obligations in life, parents, family members, all that stuff. So the first moth, or the first student, looks at Socrates. That's all he can do. Just sit back and look at him. And what he sees is a man who's got long hair. What he sees is a man who's not very attractive. What he sees is a man who has some weight on him. He slouches a little. But sometimes when he opens his mouth and talks, he's inspiring. And there comes a point when you kind of listen to him, you forget the way he looks, you forget how unattractive he is. You find yourself in this trance, you just are glued to him. And so this particular person imagines that he has understood Socrates. So what he does, he goes home, locks himself in a room, and writes 25 volumes on the life and teachings of Socrates. And he depends on his eyesight, and it depends on his ears, and it depends on a very, very limited intellectual capacity to understand everything about Socrates, and he writes a book. Now, when you publish a book, your book is going to have some audience. A lot of people are going to like what you've written about Socrates. And of the 1,000 people who have read your book, they're also going to write their own book commenting on your commentary about Socrates. And then some people are going to say, well, that is a definitive story on Socrates and his teachings. So you have one camp who says Socrates is A, B, C, D. Then out of the audience sitting looking at Socrates, perhaps even reading that particular book, they say, yes, Socrates is unattractive, true. When he opens his mouth and talks, he's actually quite inspiring. And something about me just tingles. I don't know what it is. But they have this capacity to say, I want to get closer. I want to understand him more. And remember, when you say, I want to get closer and understand him more, it means that you're not satisfied with the commentaries of the other person. And you're not satisfied with the commentaries in the book. And you need to have that dissatisfaction, that you need to hunger and yearn for something more. Now, your companion before you is completely satisfied and happy with the conclusion he's reached. Unattractive, opens his mouth, inspiring. And then you have the Analects of Confucius, for example. Let me tell you what his teachings are, ABC. You, on the other hand, you say, no, it all may be true, but I want to kind of understand him a bit better, get to know him a bit better. So you fly closer to him. Now, the problem with getting closer to Socrates is that because he is made of fire, because love is alive in him, big questions are rolling in his head constantly. The muses talk to him. When you go there, your body begins to shiver a little. You went there to ask a lot of questions, but all the questions disappear now. You feel a little nervous, and you feel the heat inside you generated by Socrates. And then you go home, and that's all you can do. You don't have the capacity for more. You feel as if you're going to explode, so you go back home. And then you begin to write your own book. Now, your book is also founded on what you have read in this previous book, but now you add a bit more to it, which is if the previous book had 25 chapters, now your book has 35 chapters, because now you talk about the heat, the closeness, the love, the passion, the nervousness, all those things that the first book didn't have. And then people will begin to read your book, and now you have 2 camps. The first camp doesn't know anything about the heat generated by Socrates, and they believe in this book. That's their faith. This other book has its own unique audience. And this set of people say, oh no, this book is incomplete. Now what you have are 2 branches looking at Socrates in completely different ways. They begin to fight, like all religious traditions. In the absence of the teacher, when Jesus dies, Christianity dies with him. What you now have are just interpretations. When Muhammad dies, the moment he dies, you have 2 branches. So what you need to know is this: Those who don't become consumed will always create division. They're divisive human beings. They may be inspiring, but they create division and they can't unify the system. Then comes Eugene. He says, you know, I've read the first book and I've read the second book. I wonder if I can get a bit more closer to Socrates. And Eugene gets very, very close, and close in this sense. After having talked to Socrates for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, he goes home, and one morning he looks at his wife and he says, I don't want to be here. He looks at this kid and he says, my child does not stand a chance in the society, and I can't do anything. I don't have the resources. I'm just going to walk away from the whole thing. And what you have is a Eugene who's been burned by the passion, the flame that lives inside Socrates. He understands the pain. He feels the pain. He lives with the pain. And then he has his own book to write. Yes, Socrates from a distance, A, B, C, D. Yes, when you sit close to Socrates, E, F, G, H. But man, just spend a bit more time with him. Instead of 2 weeks, spend 10 weeks. And then you go home and you realize nothing really matters. And then you walk around confused. You walk around anxious. You walk around angry. You walk around angry at Gaul, angry with Socrates, because they are the ones who destroyed your life. Now you see, and you want to go back and close your eyes, but you can't. You see too much now. Now you've been burnt. And now you write your own book, and some people gravitate towards your interpretation of Socrates, your experience with Socrates. Now you have 3 camps. And what happens with every single evolution, the first book stands there on its own. It's okay. It has its audience. But when the second book comes, people of the second book want to convince the first people who have read the book that there is more to Socrates than what this book suggests. People in the third community, where you have been burnt, you try to convince the second category of people and the first category of people. Now you have 3 different branches who understand Socrates in 3 different ways. And then there is Emerson. Emerson says, this is interesting. So Chandler just saw, Eugene felt. I wonder what happens if you were to be completely consumed. Instead of spending 10 weeks with Socrates, why not just go and live with him? And he does. Now he has the capacity to kind of be the perfect reflection of Socrates. Why, how, who knows? Why does he even have that passion? Because he was discontent with the first book, discontent with the second book, discontent with the third book. You see, so you have people with different capacities, willing to go to further distances to understand more. And when he comes out, after 5 years of living with Socrates, he comes out as Diogenes. And he's known to be the second Socrates, having gone completely insane. I mean, Socrates was a little sober, but Diogenes, he doesn't care about anyone or anything. Even if you're Alexander the Great, he'll tell you you suck as a human being. And if you crucify him, he says, fine, I never really cared for life. I didn't care for my body. Kill me. Best release from life. So what you have in the fourth person is some guy who has been consumed physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Now, when that person comes out, he's got fights with the first people, the second people, and third people, because he's had access to the fire. He's being consumed by the fire completely. And when he comes out, he's not just eyes and ears. He's not just, oh, generates heat. Oh, it's a little burn here. Everything about this person has been consumed by the passion and love of Socrates. When he comes out, he's Socrates gone mad. Now, how this fourth person does, how in the sense of expressing what lives inside him or her, I don't really know. Some people become mute. They don't really say about their experiences, share their experience with anyone, because they've come to realize no one really is qualified. Everyone wants to just sit back and watch, or feel the inspiration that generates some heat, or get a little closer so they can go home thinking about this stuff for a few hours and then everything will wash away. He says, no, if I want to talk to someone, they need to be consumed very much like the way I have. And so the expectation of this fourth moth or fourth student who is consumed completely by Socrates is way up there. The demands are quite hefty, and you don't really have the means to pay through the sacrifices that the demands require you to do. And so what you have again is different people, different capacities, want different things. Can Socrates convince someone who only likes to watch and listen to go further? He can, but it takes too much work. It's not necessary, it's not important.